Another brutal embarrassment for the USA, and that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points Memo. 22-year-old Australian baseball player Christopher Lane shot dead in Oklahoma last Friday for absolutely no reason at all. Mr. Lane, who played for East Central University, was out jogging when three thugs allegedly murdered him. They are 15-year-old James Edwards, 16-year-old Chancey Luna, and 17-year-old Michael Jones. Duncan Police Chief Danny Ford says the teenagers were all in trouble before, and on the day of the shooting, Edwards actually had a court appearance. Reaction to the horror is heartbreaking.
He's such an amazing person, and I'm going to miss him forever, but I'm really glad that I got the 4 years with him.
There wasn't anything he did or could have done. He was an athlete going for a jog like he would do, you know, 5 or 6 days a week in terms of his training schedule. So it's happened, it's wrong, and we just try and deal with it the best we can.
And in Australia, there is deep anger against America.
People thinking of going to the USA on business or tourist trips should think carefully about it, given the statistical fact you are 15 times more likely to be shot dead in the USA than in Australia per capita per million people.
And to those friends of ours in Australia, we would say to you, this is not Duncan, Oklahoma. I'm going to do everything that I can to ensure that we see these three thugs pay for what they did to Christopher Lane.
Now, based upon known evidence, James Edwards could be the instigator. Information about Edwards on social media indicates he may be affiliated with the Crips gang, that he wanted to be a rapper, that he had appeared on a website posing with a rifle. The father of the teen reacted this way.
I feel that he doesn't really matter. You know, he doesn't really understand it at all. He really doesn't understand how serious it is.
I find that hard to believe, but police say Edwards was dancing and joking after he was arrested. His sister blamed it on the community.
I would like for people to know in this community that if we would reach out to the youth and do more things with them, this stuff could be prevented.
Other reaction, not much. The NAACP is silent. Civil rights industry largely silent. Some liberals blaming America's lack of gun control. Fox News White House correspondent Ed Henry got this reaction from President Obama's spokesman.
Yeah, we heard from Trayvon Martin here and in the Rose Garden. Why hasn't he spoken out on this, in this case? You said there was a judicial proceeding. There was one in the Trayvon Martin case. He spoke out extensively on that one.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not sure that there's some people in this room I don't think who would agree with you that the president spoke out extensively on it.
Talking Points believes there is a destructive culture in this country. It is apparent that if convicted, the three boys have no regard for human life. Yet they had plenty of regard for the social media, for rap, for Xbox. The mother of Chancey Luna says the boy was playing that video game shortly before the murder occurred. There will come a point in America when honest people will begin to see this problem for what it is, a cultural collapse among some very distinct groups. A violent subculture is now in place, fueled by derelict parents, a barbaric media, and apathy on the part of many politicians. The incredible violence taking place in some Chicago neighborhoods, as well as mindless murders all over the country, prove this point. And until we acknowledge the source of the chaos, we will not be able to solve the problem. And that's a memo. Now for the top story tonight, reaction joining us from Washington, Republican Kate Obenshain and Democrat Kirsten Powers, also a Fox News analyst. So how do you evaluate, I should say, this story, Powers?
It's obviously a terrible tragedy. I don't quite understand the expectation that the president would be speaking about it or any other groups, because unlike the Trayvon Martin case, the attackers were immediately arrested, which is quite different from the Trayvon Martin case, where there was a dead unarmed teenager and nobody had been arrested. And I think there was a lot of concern there.
Well, let me answer your question then. I think that the nation wants to hear from their leader, President Obama, when inexplicable things happen. So he weighed in on a Trayvon Martin case. Now, if I were the president, would I get involved in this Oklahoma case? No. I wouldn't. I don't think there's a racial overtone to this. 2 blacks, 1 white. They were thugs. Unfortunately, it happens all the time. However, I think the question is legitimate. You know, if you're going to weigh in on one, Kate, you weigh in on the other. What do you say?
I think the president and Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton and some others jumped at the chance to weigh in when a horror would further their political goals. And that's a horrible thing. It's a horrible reality. But the fact that today Jesse Jackson finally said that this kind of violence should be frowned upon. That was his outrage. But, Bill, when it served the president's agenda to sort of stir up racial animosity, he compares Trayvon Martin to what his son would look like. Well,
are you saying that you believe President Obama wanted to stir up racial animosity? Is that what you're saying?
I think he absolutely wanted to stir up suspicion on racial grounds.
I disagree entirely. I think that Sharpton and others wanted to stir up racial animosity.
The president jumped right in there, Bill.
I think the president jumped right in there because he saw an opportunity to speak to his constituency that supported him to the tune of 94%.
If so,
I think it was a political move.
If so, then he would be jumping in right now to say we have a serious problem among our young people. That is a constituency.
He doesn't believe we have a serious problem among our young people.
Obviously, we do have a huge problem. This is obviously has to do with gang culture. It has to do with rap. It probably has to do with drugs.
Now you're absolutely right. But the president of the United States doesn't believe we have a serious problem.
Planet does the president not believe we have a problem,
What?
Bill? Seriously.
Okay,
on what
let me answer your question.
Does the president not believe that we have a problem?
Let me answer your question.
You don't agree with his analysis of the problem.
You just asked me a question, right?
Go ahead and answer it.
Can I answer it? Thank you.
You certainly can.
Here's the evidence. 5 years in office. He's never addressed it one time. The culture, the coarse culture, the derelict parenting. He's never made it a centerpiece. We've had healthy gardens. We've had let's do some exercise. We've had a whole bunch of other outreach programs. Nothing about this.
No, the difference is that Barack Obama has a different analysis of the situation that I happen to share that you dismiss, which is that our gun culture is what is behind this.
Okay,
yes.
so
and
the
trust
gun
me,
just
if those
walked
kids
up
didn't
to
have
the
a
Australian and shot
that guy would be alive.
The
if
gun
they didn't
just
have a
walked
gun,
right up
he'd be
and
alive.
bang.
No,
Just the gun
if
did
they didn't have a gun, he'd be alive.
They're going to have guns, Kirsten. You know,
there are.
Wait, Kate, hold it. This is how ridiculous, Powers, you sound. There are more than 100 million guns on the street of America, all right? Because it's a historical situation. Accept it. There's 100 million.
A historical situation? What does that mean?
That means that when the country was settled, everybody had a gun.
Oh, everyone had to have a machine gun?
And because of the Second Amendment, you can't take them away.
No, but I said gun culture. You deal with that. Gun culture. It's a different thing than owning a gun. It's making it sexy. It's making it seem appealing.
It's
if these kids didn't have a gun,
95% of gun owners are law-abiding good people. It's the coarsening of the culture. It's unbelievable you feel this way. 95% of people who own guns are law-abiding good people.
That doesn't mean we don't have a culture that makes guns seem sexy. It's the corruption of certain groups in this country
that's leading to this murder. It's the corruption of certain groups.
What do you mean certain groups? There are plenty of white people who use guns to go in and kill people, like children in elementary schools, in fact, now that I think of it.
All right, that's insane.
What is this now? Suddenly it's just black people have a problem?
Let me give Kate the last word.
Thanks.
Go.
It's not about gun culture. This is about a culture of violence that is promoted among our young people. It is imperative that we actually have this discussion. This issue will be swept under the rug by people who just want to talk about guns and they just want to talk about white
violence
and black violence.
Guns, Kate.
This is something that needs.
What are they doing the violence
with? Let's talk about rap lyrics that promote and glorify killing in any way. Let's talk about drugs, rampant use of drugs among our kids. Let's talk about high school violence that nobody's doing anything about.
I got to stop it. It's quite apparent that Kirsten and others do not want to talk about who's pulling the trigger of the gun. They just want to talk about the gun.
I don't even know what that
means. And I think that's a fallacy. I do. I think it's the pervasive culture, all right, that is coarsening the country, and people who don't have good parents, children who don't have supervision, are then being put in a situation where they're gunning down people because they're bored.
And the left doesn't want to talk about it. The media doesn't want to talk about it.
That's the problem.
That's not true. The left talks about it.
Ladies, next on the